can do it. Change, change. It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 do.
Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending where you are in the world. You're watching Spirit Cafe Show here on the New Thought Media Network. I'm Barbara Jean,
And I'm Marg Dupuis.
and we are so excited to be here with you today. And I want to begin by sharing our land acknowledgement. We're honored to be meeting on this land that many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people from across Turtle Island call home. We acknowledge and thank the original caretakers and knowledge keepers of this territory, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. We also give thanks to all other Indigenous peoples, recorded and unrecorded, who have shared responsibility for this territory. In honoring the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which protects this territory, we accept our responsibility to peaceably share and care for the resources that surround us. We also acknowledge, as inhabitants of these lands, that inequity and discrimination continue to affect our BIPOC and 2S LGBTQ+ families. We therefore strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. Recognizing our ultimate oneness and acknowledging our reality, past and present, we commit to moving forward in a spirit of mutual cooperation. We are one.
Thank you, Barbara. And today we have Janet Law with us today. We had the opportunity to speak with Janet before coming on live, and I've also had the opportunity to hear Janet, speak at a Sunday service. Today she is going to speak to us about bonding. Janet is a lifelong Unity student. She's a creator. She's a playwright. She creates words such as innerpreneur, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. A global citizen, a healthcare practitioner, and a breastfeeding counselor. She speaks about the bond between a mom and her child and how it can expand to the world, to humanity. Janet, please join us.
Thank you so much for having me today. I just love this triangle here, I see it as a circle, but the three of us together here and also the expanded audience today, we just welcome you in. This is just such a wonderful opportunity to be together.
Yeah, it's great to have these conversations that don't always happen organically. Sometimes we have to, sort of decide what it is we want to talk about, even if nobody else does. And so, Janet, when you and I were first speaking a couple of months back, we got talking about breastfeeding, we got talking about mothers' rights, and I have some issues about why women have to hide a way to breastfeed. And I acknowledge, like for me, I didn't like being nude publicly, so I always threw a blanket over myself. But I breastfed wherever I needed to. And I think the bond that I created with my daughter is so important. And I wish when my other three children were born that the doctors and nurses would have suggested breastfeeding back then. But it was, here's a bottle, here's some formula, and have a good life. So things have gone back to a more natural way, it seems.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I mean, every day I'm working with moms and healthcare practitioners, facilitators, professionals, and this idea of the promotion of breastfeeding has become a really important aspect to healthcare. In fact, you will see it across not only in Canada, but I think nationwide in many nations that it is the most natural thing that we can do, not only for bonding with the child to the parent, to the mother, but also that it just really is crucial for long-term health care as well. So yeah.
Yes. Such an important thing. When we think of healthcare, we don't necessarily tie our food into that, which is really quite funny because we should.
Yes.
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 There's
Well,
something about the food that we eat that's
yes.
questionable.
And the the idea that breastfeeding anytime, anywhere is really what our healthcare facilities are really urging for all of us to know and understand that it's the most natural thing that anyone can experience in the world, really. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, one of the challenges I had and what sort of brought this topic up in the first place was when I was in the airport in Chicago and I saw a little pod that was a nursing pod. And when I looked at this little little box basically in the pathway of the airport, and I've now seen it in numerous airports, I thought how uncomfortable to have to enclose ourselves in this very small space, which wouldn't give much room for motion, but also didn't seem big enough for any extra children. And many mothers have more than one. And if you're breastfeeding one, you're not going to let your 2-year-old wander off while you're breastfeeding the baby. You're going to try to keep them together. I was just really appalled by this thing, given the space that are in many airports, the space they've given to restaurants and to massage parlors and all kinds of things in airports. Surely they could have created a room, a family room that could be comfortable, maybe have a window in it so they could see outside, maybe, or just
What you're saying is just such truth, Barbara, because the thing is oftentimes mothers have actually been encouraged to go into the bathroom and breastfeed their baby. And let me ask any of you out here, like, how would you like to go and enjoy your meal sitting in a bathroom? Like, that's just not acceptable anymore.
no.
And the idea of family rooms is, I think, the way to go, because you're right. Sometimes mom has more than one child with them, uh,
Mhm.
but just an open space and a window, like a place where they can go and just be, and also breastfeeding anytime, anywhere. If a mom needs to feed her baby, she should be able to go and do that at any juncture, at any time.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder, what would happen on an airplane when you're, sitting in your seat. You surely can't do it in the bathroom there. They're very small.
Yeah.
And, is somebody around you going to be offended that you're breastfeeding your baby next to them on a plane? Like, I am kind of surprised by how we view it or how many people view it as nudity or that it could be sexualized or whatever. I think feeding our children should not have to be such work.
Well, and oftentimes too, our breasts seem to be used for doing things like selling beer, and like a product placements and things, and really, um, we were given breasts because we need to feed our babies. So you're just spot on with all of that. And there is a global movement. It's called the Breastfeeding Initiative, and so many of our healthcare facilities are initiating this in their hospitals, and that the promotion of breastfeeding is really encouraged. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So go
It's
ahead, Mark.
it's interesting, Barbara, when you talked about you mentioned being on an airplane, and if somebody, decided that they were going to breastfeed their baby and discomfort to somebody else, like where I immediately went to is, it would take me a moment to not feel uncomfortable. Do I think the person has the right? Absolutely, 100%. That bond important. However, my initial reaction, because it isn't common uh, commonplace, it's not often happened throughout my lifetime.
Yeah.
It's new. It that sounds weird to say it's new when
Mhm.
it's been a lifetime of moms breastfeeding babies. However, it would be new for me to have somebody beside me breastfeeding a baby. So
Yeah.
these types of conversations are so important.
Yeah. Let's
Very
normalize what's normal.
Yes.
exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
I think about this aspect of it as well. Just in terms of women and children and families, is that even if we look at like daycare centers, so here in the corporate world, we have these beautiful glass lined buildings, to house the financial, part of our life, the bank, whatever that might be. And yet, daycare centers very often are in church basements, they're in closed spaces that really, wouldn't it be nice if every child had a glass lined, daycare center if mom was needing, care for her children?
Mm.
And there has been some improvement around that. Like now, if you have any kind of facility for children, you have to have just as much inside space as outside space in terms of square footage. So these are all things that come out of the bond, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
We are.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one because I remember um, my youngest daughter was in daycare for just a couple of hours a day, a few days a week, because my husband's francophone, I'm anglophone. So, in order for her to get accustomed to hearing French spoken by people other than dad, we put her into a French daycare. So the workers, the other kids, French would be normalized for her because we educated her in French. So it was important to do that. And it was one of the teachers who was there. She really developed a bond with Genevieve. And Genevieve would come home with these, like 1,000 little tiny braids in her hair. She always had long hair. And this caretaker, this caregiver, Uba was her name, she would braid this little girl's hair with all of these tiny little braids. And it was so beautiful. It must have taken her the better part of the day. But again, there was a bond that was created, not only for Genevieve and Uba, but for us with her as well, because she treated our child so beautifully that sort of deepened our bond with her also, that we felt a deep love for her like she was part of the family. And it was, it's interesting, the different bonds that are created, even the bonds between friends. Marg and I are creating a bond as she's, guest co-hosting here, and I'm loving that. We're getting to know each other better. And the bonds, even as a minister and a congregant, that type of a bond can be huge. Teacher and student, it goes on, the bonds that are created.
Um, wow, you are speaking a language that I think is so important, Barbara. Like in Lynn Taggard's book, she wrote a book called The Bond, and some of you may have read it, but she says that what matters is not the isolated entity, but the space between things, the connection or relationship that occurs. And that is the bond, because we are hardwired to each other. That is like the core. It it is the foundation for whole societies, really. So,
And that was the interruption with COVID,
yes.
that
Yeah.
now we can't touch each other. We can't be near each other. We can't leave our homes. We can't, all of these can'ts, I think, put up some walls that we're still seeing the repercussions of now.
We are, and it's so simple if we can just make some decisions around the bond. And there,
Mhm.
yeah, how to fix your falling down world. That's right, because we can reconstruct it any way we want, even if you feel a bond didn't happen with you as a young person. Maybe you didn't have a good relationship with your parents or your family. Well, there's always an opportunity to reconstruct. There's always an opportunity to build those bonds stronger in so many ways.
And what if you can't build them with your family of origin? What are some of the other places where you can build lasting bonds that are important?
Well, I think one of the bonds that we sometimes don't think about as a bond is just the bond that happens with our connection to nature.
Mm,
The ocean, the mountains, the trees, a walk in the forest. Oh my goodness. I mean, in Japan, this is a daily practice. The aerosols that come off those trees actually are not only bonding, but they're healing, you
yeah.
know. And so there is there are people in our lives that have been mentors to us, people that have listened, and we feel that strong connection to them because they hear the language of the heart. And I would say that a bond can happen anytime we consider the language of the heart, when we feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
think that's the big thing. Go ahead, Mark.
Janet, one of the things that I read was that you consider yourself a global citizen.
Yeah.
So, taking bonding out of your room, out of your city, out of Canada, across the world, how do you apply that concept of bonding with humanity
Well,
outside?
yeah, that's a really, really good question you're asking, because I myself have a daily practice of just knowing that my brothers and sisters live everywhere in the world. You know, we just had a recent trip to Ireland, and I walked on that ground in Ireland, and I felt just as close to my family in Canada than I did, at the same as I did when I was walking in Ireland. And it was a sense of felt knowing that we all walk on the earth. You know, we all get up every day and we walk this place called earth, and there's something that is very, it's, I call it connective tissue. And so I think it requires a decision in our own minds that we want to feel attached rather than separated. So I do think that there is certain practices that we need to have daily in our own mental world and our own mind world. But the heart has to come first, and everything else is an extension of that. Does that answer your question, or at least give a little insight? Mark, is she frozen there?
Oh, I think she's frozen.
She's frozen. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope that. Barb, do you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, no, I think that kind of answers it for sure. And I think that idea that somehow everything is connected. There, she's back.
Yeah, there she is.
The bonding, the glue has been letting go. So I'm
Yeah.
in and out.
Yes, yes,
You were a little for a
Yeah.
minute.
Thank you. Yes, you did answer my question. And I'm also, there's a challenging part for me if the person that I'm maybe connecting with, their morals are different than mine, or, you
Mm,
know, like you're talking about being in Ireland, there's the North and the South. And so
yeah.
there's that conflict. So finding the bond in that situation may be a bit more challenging to show the heart.
Yes. And, you know, there's so many ways to listen. There's at least 7,000 ways I know, because there's a book called 7,000 Ways to Listen by Mark Neeple, which I highly, highly recommend.
Mm, mm,
And we as humans can listen. And when we listen, we hear things that we would not hear if we're talking all the time. You know, think about the bonds that you have with individuals in your life today. And so much of it, you can just be together and not say a word and feel that connection.
mhm.
So yeah, if there's any thought that you might have on that, Barbara or Mark, about the listening part when it comes to the bond.
Well, it's so important. I remember I was talking to a musician at the Unity conference. And when we were talking, one of the things that they talked about was people that they were interacting with who they absolutely loved and adored. And then after some time discovered that this person, well, it was a couple different people, that they were Trump supporters. And this musician was like, how could we develop such a close connective bond and have such different political views? Like they were absolutely shocked when they found out that these other people, which was two completely different groups of people that they were working with, and going like, how is it possible that I could really love and connect with you and we have such different beliefs? But it's the heart. It's not about the intellect.
Mhm.
Like she was connecting to the heart of these people as they worked together. The conversation of politics just accidentally dropped in much later and then was shocking
Yes,
because
yes,
it was so different from her own.
yeah.
Mhm.
I asked a friend of mine, and she's a friend to all of us actually, because she's one of the great tree stewards on the planet. And I asked her one day, you know, what is the solution to climate change? Like, what is the solution of all of us coming together, bonded together to make this world a better place in terms of our Earth? And she said, you know, Janet, her name is Diana Beresford Kroger, and again, just a magnificent individual. And she said, Janet, the first thing we have to do is we all have to hold hands together and send a prayer and a blessing out into the world. And I thought, wow, that hit me in the heart. You know, whether it's science or spirituality or whatever choice of topic we're talking about, um, here, a scientist who's speaking from the heart,
Mm.
speaking from
Exactly.
the heart, right?
Yeah. Because we are all connected. We all have the same needs. Our basic needs are identical. There is
Mm.
no difference. Doesn't matter if you were born and raised in China, Russia, North America, South America, Africa. It makes no difference. We all need food, shelter, and connection. We need that bond. And it's interesting that we have decided that the bond can only be with a certain person or certain people, and everybody
Mhm.
else is expelled from that idea. And I think that's what's creating the warring world that we live in, is that it's all about what's mine, or I have fear of what's going on around me. And I remember when my daughter was little and there was all this stranger danger talk. And I went, no, 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 no. I'm not talking to my daughter about stranger danger. Strangers can be very helpful. And so that didn't work for me. Um, but the idea uh, that what intuitively we know, our heart knows what's good for us and what isn't. And so forgetting about strangers is like,
Yeah.
that it could be your family member who is the most dangerous person in your life. So, we can't do that. And Cheryl just put, yes, no matter what we believe, hold hands and send out prayers, love, light, whatever it is that works for each of us. I think about the song that we used to sing in most New Thought centers all around North America at the end of every service. Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. And we did it by holding hands.
And
And we stopped doing it. And I know that I stopped doing it in my center because it was a habit that nobody wanted to break. But maybe it's time we reintroduce it,
Mhm.
and we do it with a very clear consciousness of let us connect, let us create a bond one to the other, where what happens to my world family happens to me. And so I want that connection. Like maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to look at some of our old ways of being and embrace those as we expand into new ideas. But the idea of holding hands,
Mm.
yes, I
that's
I remember singing that song at 8 years old at the very first center I ever attended, and I've been singing that song my whole life. And I tell you, that actually is a practice for the bond for all of us. Just those words. Let
yeah,
there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. And oftentimes, if a person has not bonded and feel that connectedness, then they will act out in ways that aren't necessarily good for our communities and our societies. So compassion and having heart is so important. And going back to the breastfeeding for a moment here, it's like when a mother and a child are skin to skin, um, their hearts are beating
Mm.
as one, two, yes. And we're also going out into that field now too, where we have to accept all people, all ways of being, and so we also are bringing in, the movement of our trans community, and many individuals within the trans community are wanting to co-parent and parent, um, and to breastfeed their children too. So I bring that little piece in because life is changing and our world is changing, and we have to listen.
you have
Uh,
to listen.
listen.
And I think that the change that we're experiencing is not so much a change as it is a new awareness.
Yes.
I think trans people have been around all along and have been told that they're crazy, or that they're imagining things, or whatever the case may be. And I think that we as people, the best thing we can do is find a way to love one another, regardless if somebody's life is a bit different than mine. I'm doing a show here on the New Thought Media Network on November 21st, Transgender Awareness, and
Great.
it'll be a live show that will go for 90 minutes, a special feature, and 7 p.m. Eastern Time, November 21st, just at the end of National Transgender Awareness Week.
Wow.
So
That is, wow.
it's
That so,
important.
yeah, very, very important. Wow.
Yeah,
I'm really touched by what you're saying right now. And that, yes, this has always been as it's always been. And yet we forget, and then we remember, and then
Mm.
we forget, and then we remember, and then we forget. So,
oh, that darn Alzheimer's. It
yes,
just keeps kicking in.
yes,
We're gonna take a little short commercial break here. You're watching Spirit Cafe show on the New Thought Media Network. Our guest is Janet Law, and of course, my beautiful guest co-host Marg Dupuis is with us today, and we're going to be back in just a minute. So don't go away. There's more to come.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.
And we're back. So continuing this conversation on bonding, it's so good. We're going all over the place. I love it. So when it comes to the world, the way it looks at the moment, and this isn't the first time it's looked like this, it cycles, I think. What is the value, do you think, of whole bond to creating a new reality for humanity when it comes to the idea of peace?
Wow. I'm really humbled by what you just said, because this is something that everybody can do. Everybody can do it. And we all know the word, what it means to be an entrepreneur, going out in the world and creating a business. But I kind of created this word called innerpreneur. And it's the idea of each person taking the business of themselves and finding that personal fulfillment creatively, spiritually, and emotionally. And what that does, it creates an opportunity for social change to happen. And that innerpreneur is something like all great entrepreneurs are. The innerpreneur is developing that all the time. They're always committed. How can I be kind? How can I be more kind? What can I do in this situation to show compassion? Like there's an act. It really is a call to action for everybody. And just one thought a day of goodness makes the world a better place. Mm-hmm. And when we have those thoughts that come through our mind of fear and anxiety and whatever that emotion might be that is not necessarily creating a good result, we can begin to catch ourselves and begin to change those thought patterns as well.
Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing you say, Janet, is I think something that I think about often is that I can't personally help somebody on the other side of the world. However, I can perhaps help my neighbor, help my friend with the cashier, and I believe that spills over
It
the
does.
butterfly effect, right?
It does. Yeah. That inner force enables us to connect to all living things and can create harmonized living communities and societies.
Mm-hmm.
It's exponential in terms of how big it can be. The circle can be as big as we want it to be, and yet we must start with the individual at the very beginning of coming into this world.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think that one needs to believe that their voice, their acts of kindness makes a difference, and not dismiss it, so that you fertilize the next time. It does make a difference. Not the ego stepping in, but it does make a difference.
yes,
And I
and
think,
it's
like, oh, go ahead.
no. You go, Barbara. You go.
I was just thinking of the idea of paying it forward. Um, the idea that as we do things for another, or somebody does something for us, and it's not necessarily about giving back to that individual, but giving it forward, that I think the cycle of creating healthy bonds and of impacting all of us as we take the goodness that we share and then share it further. And when somebody else does something for us, we share that further. I think all of the ways in which we connect one to the other creates really lasting bonds that are really transformative.
Mm.
And getting to know the people in our neighborhoods. I don't know how many people I've spoken to who live on a street that they've lived on for 20 years and they don't know their neighbors. Or
Yes.
they live in a condo building and they don't know anybody else in the building.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You bring up another connection with the bond in nature here, because one of my passions as well is I love the bees, and I took my beekeeping courses, and the beautiful thing about a beehive is that everyone in the beehive, every bee has a purpose. There's the drones, there's the scout bees. They even have grave digger bees, and these are the bees that if somebody passes, when one of the bees passes in the hive, they carry them out respectfully and make sure that their cycle of life continues. Like, this is an amazing metaphor for our own lives. You know,
Mm.
what is in your own quote unquote beehive? How do you function within your own world, in your own community? And yes, we can live in a condo and never even know who our next door neighbor is. That's pretty
Mhm.
sad. Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
it happens a lot. And there's a value in getting to know the people around you. The house we just moved into, we have tenants in our basement. And, it's a little bit like, I wonder who these people are. Well, they happen to be my family.
Yes.
It's like as soon as we met them, it's like, oh my gosh, I just have two more kids. It's so wonderful to connect in a way that we just support each other. And one of the people who lived downstairs was having a bad day, and so I went out and just said, "Hey, come here for a second," and gave him a hug, and just said, like, you gotta hook up into this heart space and move on. And there's something that happens with that that's really powerful when somebody and a couple of people connect in a way that's beyond um, just being peaceful with one another,
Yes.
just putting in time together or tolerating. I hate that word tolerance.
Yes. No
Uh,
tolerating. Only acceptance. No tolerating. You go to
no
accept.
tolerating. Oh
Yes.
my gosh, it's yet tolerance, that's a word that I really dislike.
Yes.
And but I think about how we connect, and if we take the time, like, we were talking about yesterday, and we were talking about Halloween and kids coming out, and they were so kind and so respectful and so remarkable. And Marg, who lives in a completely different city than me, she had the same experience of these beautiful children who would say, "Oh, thank you so much, and you have a beautiful home, and oh, I get to pick what I want," and yet, like, it was just next level,
Mhm.
the kindness and the respect, and yeah, it was really beautiful.
And look where it traveled.
I know, here it is all over Canada and the US. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
I was having a cup of tea with a friend of mine recently, and we were in a coffee shop, and a little boy started to scream very loudly, and the friend I was with was getting very irritated, like really irritated. And why doesn't she do something with that kid? And I just sat calmly. I didn't, and I just sent blessings to that mom because that mom was having a really difficult time. So finally, the mom went outside with the child because so many people were showing their irritation physically and verbally.
Yeah.
So when the mom went outside, I said, to my friend, I said, I'm just going to go outside for a minute. I went outside and I looked at the little boy and I said, I just want to tell you something. You have the best mom in the world. She is just so tremendous. I bet you learn a lot from each other. And that little boy, he got a big smile on his face. And then she took me aside and said that it had been a very difficult day. And, anyways, numerous things. Anyways, so then she did go back into the coffee shop and was able to get her drink. And the child was just beaming because sometimes we just need to
Yeah.
acknowledge what is.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to judge. It's so easy to go, "What's her problem? Why can't she get a handle on that kid?" Well, if you've had a kid screaming around you, easier said than done.
Yes. Yes.
I remember sitting in a cafe with my daughter and my granddaughter, and we're sitting at the table, and my granddaughter is like being a bit loud and out of control and yelling, and we're like doing everything, my daughter and I doing everything, trying to get her to calm down. And my husband walks in, who had never had children before, who has, one small child, and he sits down beside her. In fact, this was before our daughter was born. And he sits down beside her and he goes, "Oh, this magic wand you have, it only works if you whisper."
That's awesome.
So the moms who'd been doing it for years didn't have a clue, but the guy who'd never been a mom nailed it.
Yes, you got that right. Yeah. So this interconnectedness that is through and in all things, the bond, it allows for not only the individual to be connecting personally, but it's the impetus to completely integrate fully with others. And so we kind of started this conversation off today speaking about breastfeeding. Well, that's about connecting with another human being. And in this case, it's a necessity that a child needs food,
Yeah.
and we have to feed that child. And so I know there are moms that, they feel badly because, they weren't able to breastfeed or they had other forms of feeding. What matters is the bond. That's what matters.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
And that's what lasts a lifetime. Like, I have 4 children ranging in age from 50 to 18.
Wow.
And yeah, some people don't learn. They take a minute to get it. But what's lovely about that is that even though when my first was born, I was very young and not so smart about some things. And then the youngest, of course, I was very old and much smarter, I think. But the interesting thing is, all 4 of them have a deep and a really powerful connection to me. Like we have very strong bonds that have gone beyond mistakes that were made, knowingly or unknowingly, throughout the years, and to a place of great respect and admiration for each other. And I think that's a big step, because sometimes as parents we want our children to do things in a way that we think is acceptable. And I got broke of that habit when I was uh, when I was quite young, and my first child hung up on me one day when I was trying to tell her how to run her life.
Oh,
Oh dear.
Oh, yeah, okay, well, let me just swallow that and come back to the conversation with a different attitude. But I think sometimes as parents, we think we know more, and the truth is we don't really know our children. Uh, they know who they are at some level. They know who they are, and we need to give them a container where they can find that out
yeah.
and live that, right?
You know, we're on the New Thought media, right? This
Yeah.
is what we're doing today, right? And when I think about New Thought, I can't help but think about the word metaphysics. You know, that word really is defined by seeing beyond the physical, above, below, in, through, and it's like we all live in this huge metaphysical world if we choose to see it that way, that it's not just the physical body, but it's the deeper essence of who we are and what we can do in the world, and to see that in everyone. It's in everyone. It is in everything.
I'm thinking about what you said, Janet, about the heart to skin connection with the mother and baby. It took me to a book that I read, one of my favorite authors, Richard Wagamese. And he talks about this, and it's a fiction based on truth, right? And he talks about a child that did not grow up with his family of origin, but reconnects with the indigenous peoples. And what he learns, because he doesn't know his history, what he learns is the reason why the drumming is so important is that it's likened to the mother and baby bond, the mother's heartbeat. So it's important in their, from what he is saying, in their dialogue when they sit around and tell their stories, to have the drumming, because it's the sound, replicating the sound of the mother's heartbeat.
Yep.
That heartbeat is so powerful. I was at a concert a week and a half ago. One of the churches here in Toronto had its 50th anniversary, and Jackie Richardson was one of the performers, and she did a song called Fragile. And she started off with the drum, and the drum was just, and then she said, you know, that heartbeat could be you, could be you. And she went on from there, and if that heartbeat stops, and then the drumming just stopped, and it was like silence for a moment, and she said, death, we're fragile. And it was that the way that that drum brought that home. Like, it's, to me, it's remarkable how deeply drumming can touch us at our core. And so it's really, really very, very powerful.
I think it actually lies very deep in our DNA. I remember as a teenager just loving really, really hard rock and roll, you know, and I was talking to a friend of mine who was a musician, and he said, you know the reason for that, don't you? And I said, well, I really like listening to the music. He said, actually, it's actually in our DNA. There's this ritual of this beat, of the heartbeat, that I think we desire. And so, you know, when we hear it, there's something that gets triggered inside of us at a very cellular level of why we enjoy that ritualistic beat, because it is the beating heart. So I thought that was an interesting observation.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I think our heartbeat is definitely our connecting piece.
Yeah. If we could breathe to that rhythm.
yes,
Hey, if we could all breathe to that rhythm. Wow.
yes, yes,
Imagine where the world would go.
yeah.
Years ago at my center, we went downtown here in Toronto to Dundas Square, and we did, had big signs that said free hugs, free hugs. And it was fascinating watching people respond
Mhm.
to the idea of free hugs because, again, it's a bond, right? It's like the minute we hug somebody energetically, it's like we're one. Well, we are one anyway, but it's really tangible in that moment. So it was fun to watch people because really young people, teenagers, 20 somethings, they would just race up to us and almost knock us over to give us a hug. Uh, Many little bit older people would be almost running into traffic to avoid us for fear that we would force the hug on them, which of course we wouldn't do. Um, and then there was some couples that'd be walking along and they'd be looking at us and go, "You don't have to hug us. You can hug each other."
Mm.
Right. And so then they would hug. But it was such a beautiful experience
Mm.
to have all this hugging happening in downtown Toronto because
Yes, yes.
downtown Toronto is not a place to do hugging
right.
unless it is. And we had a lot of fun doing it,
Yes.
but received in very different ways from different people.
And I really love the idea of the circle of life that we come in and we leave, and like I can't help think about my mom right now as we're speaking about the bond, because hush little baby, don't say a word, mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. As a young baby, those were the first words that I remember, because my mother had a very long, difficult birth.
Hmm.
She was separated from me for 3 days. And so, as a result of that, she was preparing her lungs to bond with me as soon as she could see me and be with me. And then, when my mom passed a few years ago, I did the same thing. We went into her room, and I knew she was ready to go.
Yeah.
And I sang that song to her because we had been bonded for life. We really were. And we find different ways to bond. When our son was born, I did the same thing. I sang that song, and it was like this kind of natural weaving together of the tapestry of not only my own personal life, but the lives of my mother and now the next generation, and find ways to bond. There's many ways that we can do this.
Even checking into our own history and finding out sort of the history of our families and everything that's happened prior to our incarnation, that too gives us a deeper sense of who we've been connected to and what that means, because it's all had an impact on us for sure.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, Janet.
Yes.
Speaking of connection, you said earlier when we spoke about your connection with the name Margaret, the word Marg, and you just shared about Hush Little Baby. So I had the privilege to be with my dad when he was transitioning 12 years ago. And I was with my two brothers, and we were holding hands. And I was inspired to get up on the bed behind my dad.
Mhm.
And so it was just a beautiful moment. We're all holding hands. And what comes out of my mouth is that song, Hush Little Baby.
Oh, oh, I got goosebumps. Oh my
I
goodness.
know.
Oh my.
I know.
There's only one of us here, only one thing going on. We're
How could you have
connected.
known that? Oh my goodness.
Isn't that
You
isn't that
did that.
funny? Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
and it wasn't like I hadn't planned on it. It just came out, and my brother kind of looked up at me like, Mark, are you?
You
But
all right?
yeah, are you all right? Yeah, yeah.
What
Well, they already know I'm not, but that was so awesome when you said that, Janet.
Well,
you described is what we've been talking about for the last hour. That interconnected bond. Like, how could I know and how would you know that there was even this other deeper layer? But if we listen, wow,
the
what can you
connections are
find?
everywhere. My mom was Margaret as well.
Oh, oh my goodness.
I know it's interesting, when we come together, we don't necessarily know what the bonds are. And yet we can take, I mean, the three of us are on opposite sides of the country. I mean, there's as many miles between us as almost possible. And yet somehow here we are as one, creating a conversation about family and connection and bonding, and even about how we heal our world. And we do that by healing our own self, our own innerpreneur has to be allowed out.
Yes.
Give her life.
And
Let
give it,
her speak.
yeah, give it. There was a photo that was shown on the front of Scientific America magazine a few years ago. And what they discovered was they took a picture of all of the galaxies. There was one photo. And what we discovered looking deeper into that picture is that connects all of the universe galaxies. This picture that had been taken by a telescope is in the shape of a heart. It's in the
What,
shape of a heart.
what a surprise, eh?
Wow.
It's interesting, and we're down to our last 3 minutes here. Time has flown by as usual, but it's interesting to me because I have a tattoo on my arm that says "Love is the answer," and that's what the heart represents to me is love. And I think of love as oneness. Right? There's only one of us here, and I think that if we can begin to be compassionate with ourselves, living from the inside out, we create a world that it really is transformed. So, Janet, final thought. What do you want people to take away from this today?
Love is the greatest healer. Love is the greatest power. And the bond that we have with each other enables that love to grow.
Beautiful. Thank you. Marg, what about you, my love?
Well, it's my son's birthday, and they're coming over on Saturday. So, talking about the connection with family, I'm already envisioning what that's going to look like and what it's going to feel like.
Yeah, cuddle time.
Cuddle time, my big teddy bear.
My sons, one of them is 5'11", the other one's 6 feet tall, and every now and again and I'm 5'2", and every now and again they'll compete to see who gets to sit on my lap, because the bond is forever. I really love this conversation, and I think the important thing for me is that we come to an understanding that within us we each are created unique and special, like everybody else. And if we would just connect with each other and learn about each other's unique and special aspects, there would be a greater sense of love. And I really like the idea of us holding hands. Just being that love in the world. That's what we're being called to.
And your entrepreneur.
Yes, your entrepreneur. Bring it out. The business that we're in right now is our own inner, growing that, developing that, loving that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Janet, for being here. Thank you, Mark, for being my fabulous co host again. And grateful that Cheryl was in the room today, listening in and keeping up with the show. I'm so grateful to all of you. Have a most wonderful week. You've been watching Spirit Cafe show here on the New Thought Media Network. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and hey, donate to the network. It's a good place. Bye for now.
Thank you.